The UN forecasts global economic growth to remain at 2.8% in 2025. 34 countries pledge an additional $2 billion in military assistance to Ukraine. And U.S. non-farm payrolls increased by 256,000 jobs in December. Welcome to Qnews Economic Bulletin, where we present the latest developments shaping the global economy, from key market trends and financial updates to regional economic highlights and forecasts. We bring you essential news and analysis to keep you informed. The UN's World Economic Situation and Prospects report has forecast global economic growth to remain at 2.8% in 2025. According to the report, despite easing inflation and improved labor markets, growth will stay below the pre-pandemic 3.2% due to risks from geopolitical conflicts, trade tensions, and high borrowing costs. Inflation is expected to drop to 3.4%, prompting possible rate cuts. However, many developing nations face persistent high inflation.
The global economy is set to tread water in 2025, with growth stuck at a sluggish 2.8%, matching 2024 levels. The United Nations World Economic Situation Prospects report paints a picture of resilience amidst the storm of challenges, but warns of tough times ahead. While inflation is expected to ease from 4% in 2024 to 3.4% in 2025, offering hope for lower interest rates, weak investments, low productivity, and mounting debt are keeping the brakes on progress. Regional growth paints a mixed picture. The United States is set to slow to 1.9% as consumer spending cools, while Europe inches toward recovery, buoyed by easing inflation. South Asia is stealing the show, with India powering ahead at a projected 6.6%. Making it the world's fastest growing major economy. China, however, faces headwinds, with growth slightly dipping to 4.8% due to property market woes. The UN stresses that bold and collective action is needed to tackle the interconnected crisis of debt, inequality, and climate change. Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for a united effort, urging nations to seize 2025 as a turning point toward a more prosperous and sustainable future.
Joining us from Cairo is economic researcher Dr. Mohammed Al-Bahwashi to discuss the latest developments related to the global economy and the United Nations expectations. Dr. Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us on the Economic Bulletin. And first off, the UN predicts global growth will remain at 2.8% in 2025, unchanged from 2024. What are the key structural issues causing this stagnation?
First, I wish to thank you for hosting me. And of course, we have seen over the previous period, the world is witnessing a lot of geopolitical crises, and it has given some negative repercussions on the global economy. So the world is still having some inflation pressures, which led to more restrictive economic policies like raising the interest rate. So raising the interest rate was the greatest hurdle to global investment over the last year. So I believe by keeping the same rates, the idea of having the same growth at the same like last year would be good, but still with the continuation of military operations in Russia, Ukraine, or in the Middle East, and with the the impact on the chains, this all will be pressuring the global economic growth. Though there has been a boom in some of the Asian economies and some developing countries that are hoping for high growth rates. But still, the global economy as a whole is still witnessing the negative repercussions of the geopolitical situation over the last year.
Yes,
And
sir,
probably
sorry, but
this
let me
is
interrupt you right here. Speaking of the geopolitical tensions, how significant is the impact of weak investment and high debt levels compared to other factors which you've mentioned, the geopolitical tensions?
Of course, the situation that is happening in the world and the events, geopolitical events, led to more inflation pressures on the supply chains. And there is more ambiguity about this. The prices of oil is still ambiguous because of the widening conflict in the Middle East. The global economy and the global trade in the Red Sea is also affected, and this has affected the global economy and more cost of shipment and transportation, and this kept the inflation high. All of this is against flourishing investment or growth in the global economy. So the international crises are more affecting negatively the global economy, though there is still some growth even in some EU countries that are sort of recovering, but yet there is more pressure from the geopolitical situation that is shadowing negatively the economy and freezing the growth to the same level of last year.
Now, the global growth remains below the pre-pandemic average of 3.2%. Are we witnessing a permanent structural shift in the global economy, or is this a temporary adjustment?
the the whole world is trying to there is more of an intention to build a new economy under a bipolar economic situation. There is the emergence of the BRICS more and more global South and developing countries are trying to search for opportunity in the global economy. So the diversity and multipolarity in the global economy is more needed now to alleviate the world from the geopolitical impacts. But still, I think in this year, with the new economic alliances like BRICS, I believe this would be able to create a rather new window for the global economy that can reduce the impact of the geopolitical events that negatively affected the global economy and kept the growth at this stage.
Now, let's have a regional outlook. South Asia, led by India, is expected to be the fastest growing in the region, while Europe and the US face slowdowns. What accounts for this sharp contrast in regional economic performance?
The Asian countries were very much investing into their own inputs for their economic cycle. So the impact of the supply chains they were less impacted by the disruption in the supply chains compared to Europe regarding the Middle East conflict and the Russian-Ukrainian conflicts. So because of the widening production in India and China, there is more growth rates in these areas compared to what happened to EU, because EU is more impacted by the geopolitical incidents in the area immediately next to Europe. So this is one of the key elements. Asia is distant from these events, and the Asian countries are more relying on investing into their own production and more export to the world. But they were still affected by the disruption of the global trade because of the higher cost of transportation and shipment, because of the political impact of the global crisis. But yes, the impact was less on them than in the EU.
So, Antonio Guterres calls for 2025 to be a turning point. What are the most critical steps nations must take to ensure the year becomes a moment of progress rather than stagnation?
The economic issues are directly connected with the political and military events in the world. So there are two cases that are still open on the global level, the Russian-Ukrainian crisis and what's happening in the Middle East, because the conflict in the Middle East is widening between the state of Israel and all the neighboring countries. So the crisis is moving from Gaza to Lebanon to Syria and then to Yemen. So all of this has overcasted a shadow on the global economy. So with the continuation of the conflict the way it has been last year, there will be no improvement in the global economy, though all countries are trying to get out of this gap and to get to a more solid and more growing economy. So, without a resolution of the Palestinian case and no kind of progress on the Ukrainian Russian file, this year will be just similar to the previous one.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad El Bahwaishi, for your insights and for all the information you provided us with. Thank you for joining us on the Economic Bulletin. Thank you so much. Back to our news, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman has announced that the 11th China-UK Economic and Financial Dialogue is scheduled for January 11 in Beijing, co-chaired by Chinese Vice Premier and UK Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves. This high-level dialogue, established in 2008, serves as a platform for addressing strategic economic and financial issues. The discussions will cover macroeconomic policies, trade and investment, industrial cooperation, financial market development, and regulatory cooperation. The resumption of this dialogue aims to enhance economic and financial exchanges between China and the UK. China has announced plans to adopt a more proactive fiscal policy in 2025 to bolster economic growth. Vice Finance Minister Liao Min stated that the country has ample fiscal resources and intends to accelerate spending to stimulate investment. He emphasized the need to monitor both international and domestic situations closely, adjusting policies dynamically to support economic and social development. These measures aim to address challenges such as property crisis, high local government debt, and weak consumer demand, reflecting China's dedication to sustaining economic stability and growth. Still in China, where VAT data from the State Administration of Taxation has revealed that the country's economic recovery shows significant progress with improved sales revenue in the fourth quarter of 2024. Key sectors like railway, aerospace, and computer equipment saw solid gains. High-tech and digital industries grew by 10.6% and 5.5% respectively. Retail sales surged, with home audiovisual equipment and appliances up by 38.1% and 75.4%. Infrastructure investment boosted civil engineering construction, which rose 7% in December. Japan's Prime Minister has met with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim to strengthen defense and economic ties amid rising regional concerns over China's assertiveness. This marks Ishiba's first bilateral trip as Japan's leader, reflecting Japan's commitment to Southeast Asia as U.S. presence in the region may wane following President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration. Ishiba plans to visit Indonesia next, emphasizing the strategic importance, both nations being near vital shipping lanes. Discussions also focused on securing stable supply chains with Malaysia, the current chair of ASEAN. Rwanda has abolished the export license requirement for most businesses to enhance the business environment and stimulate small and medium enterprises. Rwanda's Trade Ministry announced that export licenses will only be required by the importing country. 2025 reforms also streamline import licenses, focusing on high-risk products. quality and safety permits now last 5 years. These changes aim to boost exports from 15% to 30% of GDP, support SMEs, and integrate them into global markets. Service fees for SMEs are waived, while larger enterprises face a capped fee of $71.46. The Kremlin has accused U.S. President Joe Biden's administration of attempting to leave a toxic legacy for President-elect Donald Trump, with claims that Biden may impose a final round of sanctions on Moscow. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov made these remarks during a conference call with reporters. A U.S. official revealed on Thursday that Biden is expected to announce new sanctions targeting Russia's economy this week, aimed at supporting Ukraine's war efforts before Trump assumes office. Peskov also commented on the ongoing military aid to Ukraine, highlighting that the Biden administration is committed to ensuring the continuation of the war through its final days in power. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced that 34 countries pledged an additional $2 billion in military assistance to Ukraine during a meeting with Western allies in Germany. The support will enhance Ukraine's air defense, naval forces, air forces, artillery, and mining efforts. While Zelensky did not specify which countries made the pledges, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken confirmed that the U.S. would provide $500 million in aid, including air defense missiles and munitions for F-16 fighter jets.
Because the fact is, make America great again.
Have Joe Biden.
Take it back.
The Labor Department has announced that U.S. non-farm payrolls increased by 256,000 jobs last month after rising by a downwardly revised 212,000 in November. This unexpected acceleration pushed the unemployment rate down to 4.1%, reflecting a strong labor market despite the Federal Reserve's recent interest rate hikes. Wages grew by 0.3% in December, contributing to a 3.9% annual increase. However, concerns linger over potential disruptions from Donald Trump's proposed trade and immigration policies. Nigerian Justice Minister Lateef Fagbemi has announced that his country and the U.S. have finalized an agreement to repatriate $52.88 million in forfeited assets linked to former petroleum minister and her associates. The recovered funds will support rural electrification projects through the World Bank, with $50 million directed towards expanding access to renewable energy. An additional $2.88 million will be granted to the International Institute for Justice to enhance counter-terrorism efforts across Africa. Ukraine's foreign ministry has announced that Kyiv anticipates high-level talks with the incoming U.S. administration, including a potential Trump-Zelensky meeting following Donald Trump's inauguration. Kyiv clarified the delay of Trump's envoy's visit was due to legal reasons. Meanwhile, Ukraine defended its decision to end Russian gas transits, countering criticism from Slovakia by highlighting Russia's role and Europe's reliance on Moscow. Ukraine continues navigating challenges amid its ongoing conflict with Russia. Emirati billionaire Hussein Sajweni has announced plans to invest $20 billion in U.S. data centers across 8 states, including Texas, Arizona, and others. This initiative aims to support the growing demands of artificial intelligence and cloud computing sectors. Sajwani, founder of Damac Properties, made the announcement alongside Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, highlighting the pro-business climate anticipated in the upcoming administration. The investment is expected to expedite regulatory processes, with Damac contributing up to 30% from its balance sheet, while the remainder will be funded through debt. Oil prices rallied more than 4% on Friday to reach their highest level since October, as traders focused on potential supply disruptions from more sanctions on Russia. Brent crude futures gained 4.6% to $80.42 a barrel, reaching $80 a barrel for the first time since October 7. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures advanced 4.8% to $77.49. Gold prices rebounded on Friday as uncertainty surrounding the incoming Trump administration's policies lifted safe haven appeal, even as a stronger than expected U.S. employment data reinforced expectations the Federal Reserve might not cut interest rates as aggressively this year. Spot gold climbed 0.6% to $2,685.38 per ounce. U.S. gold futures rose 1.3% to $2,726.10. U.S. stocks are recoiling on worries that Friday's good news on the job market may be too good and prove to be bad for Wall Street by keeping inflation and interest rates high. The S&P 500 was down 1.7% in morning trading and on track for its fourth losing week in the last 5. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down for 1.4%, and the Nasdaq Composite was 2.2% lower. The DAX declined 0.52% at the closing bell. At the same time, the Euro Stoxx 50 slipped 0.82%. The CAC 40 finished the session with a 0.79% loss. The FTSE 100 fell 0.86% simultaneously. In Asia, Nikkei 225 slipped 1.05%, Hang Seng dropped 0.92%, and Shanghai dropped 1.33%. Egypt's Minister of Planning and Economic Development, Rania Al-Mashot, has met with European Parliament member Céline Imart to discuss the €4 billion second phase of the macroeconomic support mechanism. The phase aims to stimulate growth and green investments. Talks centered on strengthening Egypt-EU partnerships, focusing on economic support and renewable energy financing. The two sides also discussed the first tranche of the mechanism, amounting to €1 billion, as well as a €7.4 billion financial package approved in 2024. Egypt, Greece, and Cyprus have strengthened economic ties by signing a cooperation protocol to establish a joint business council. The agreement was formalized during the Egyptian-Greek-Cypriot Business Forum held at the Egyptian Federation of Chambers of Commerce alongside the 10th Trilateral Cooperation Summit. Egypt's Minister of Planning, Rania Al-Mashot, highlighted $4.2 billion in concessional financing secured for local and foreign private sectors in 2024, the highest since 2020. That's all for now. Here's a wrap-up of what we've covered. The UN forecasts global economic growth to remain at 2.8% in 2025. 34 countries pledge an additional $2 billion in military assistance to Ukraine. And U.S. non-farm payrolls increased by 256,000 jobs in December. This concludes our economic bulletin. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EG to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.